Aloha folks, it's your boy Jax. Just got back from Maui, doing a little bit of fire prevention and maintenance up in Kula, volunteering down at King's Cathedral and over at Lahaina Gateway Center, and talking to as many people as I possibly could. Some who were in the Kula fire, some who escaped with their lives out of the Lahaina fire, and medical personnel that were there watching all the people come into the hospital and getting a lot more information on how this whole thing went down. First thing is to combat some of the misinformation that's been going around. So let's start with a couple points. Number one, MPD, Maui Police Department, was blockading the roads, keeping people from being able to escape. If you don't know, the storm caused the power poles to get knocked over, the live power lines as well, into the road, blockades the road. You can't drive over it, you can't drive around it. The road's closed. So they closed the road. Even if you would have gotten past the police barricade, you would have gotten there, had to turn around and go back up and around anyway. So, there's nothing they could have done about that. They weren't maliciously trying to keep people in the town. Number two, they said that the water was shut off in Lahaina and Kula. Water was not shut off. So the water system in Hawaii to power the fire hydrants is dependent on the electrical grid. Now Kula has a backup generator, a diesel backup generator, that was turned on after the power lines were knocked over, causing huge electrical shortages in town. Right, there's not enough electricity to pump all the water to fight this fire, so the backup generator goes on. Well, the backup generator is not big enough for firefighting, and it failed and leaked a bunch of pump oil and funk into the water, which is a big part of the reason why the water in Kula was contaminated. So it wasn't shut off, it was relying on the electrical grid, and the backup generator failed. Same thing happened in Lahaina. Now, I was in the 2018 fire, and I was wondering why didn't they shut the electricity off during this tropical storm? The reason is that the water system in Lahaina for the fire hydrants and the people needs the electrical grid to be on. And it's a terrible system having that. So, the trees fall down into the power grid or power lines, causes a spark, right, which they can't turn the power off now, because if they do, there's not going to be any water to fight the fire. Also, the raging wildfire caused many of the water lines in Lahaina to burst, meaning water's going all over the place. It's not going to the fire hydrants. The disaster exacerbated other issues, and that's why there was not enough water in Lahaina to fight that. Let's see, what's another thing? Oh yeah, people I've seen this thing going around. I mean, it doesn't take much to realize this, but the whole blue stuff, not getting burnt. All right, the first photo in that one viral content, there's a dude in a blue shirt walking around too. It's like a filtered photo. Two, that photo of the ceramic pot. Well, ceramic is made to withstand high heat. Three, those blue umbrellas. Those are flame retardant umbrellas. They're not going to catch on fire. Let's see, what else? Oh, people saying that it was a laser beam, and that's why all the people were still in their cars, choked to death. Well, in a large fire, and I've talked to some people that were in the Paradise fire as well, if you're in a huge fire, right, it sucks in all the oxygen around the fire to fuel the fire. So you could be very, very far away from a fire, right, and it's still sucking the oxygen out of the atmosphere around you, and it's hard to breathe. Even if you're upwind from the fire, you're not getting any smoke in your face, you're still losing oxygen. So some of these people got out of their cars and they got out and they escaped, right? And then some people were still had their seatbelts on when when they died, because they're just sitting in the car looking at the fire, and then all of a sudden there's no oxygen, or they get hit with one big blast of burnt lead or burnt gasoline or something with a lot of noxious fumes, and you're dead instantly. You pass out from asphyxiation long before you burn to death. If you're also a firefighter going into a burning building and you have a mask on and that mask comes off, you have like 2 breaths max before you're dead from all the chemicals, the smoke, and the lack of oxygen. So these people died of asphyxiation. That's why they were still in their cars like that. Let's see what else has been going around. Conspiracies. Oh yeah, and all the kids being home from school. It was the last day of summer break, and school is supposed to start the next day. And yeah, shelter in place is pretty standard for a disaster like that. You know, if there's a giant storm outside knocking shingles and wood chunks off of the houses, you're not going to tell people to go outside and get hit by a giant chunk of wood and die. So yeah, that's just to cover up some of the conspiracy stuff that's been going around. You know, I was very quick to blame the government for negligence, and I was upset at the power company because I was in that 2018 fire. I'm watching these power lines getting, you know, blown into by trees. I'm seeing them spark. I'm seeing the trees catch on fire. And I'm like, wow, why didn't they, you know, shut the power off? Well, they can't. Because if they do, there's not going to be any water to fight the fires that are already there. It's a terrible system. There's no fail-safe, and there's an insufficient fail-safe in Kula, and it's an infrastructure problem. And it's sad, but there's really no way to prevent this thing. It sucks unless we had, you know, a better water management system, like, you know, a giant generator that could power the fire hydrants without having to have the electricity on. But hindsight is 2020. Second part of this video is the idea of the smart city and these motivations by the government to, as people saying why, you know, the government wanted to develop Maui to be this 15-minute smart city, and, you know, they had all these big plans, and that's why they leveled everything so they could get everyone to leave. Well, if you don't know this about Maui, one thing that we're really good at is the developers have these giant pie-in-the-sky ideas about how they're gonna, you know, turn Wailuku into this giant sprawling metropolis shopping mall thing, right? I was trying to start a taco business down there a couple years back, and, you know, the guy who's the landlord showed me the plans for the city, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna build all this stuff, right? And, like, you know, the way it works in Maui is like they'll say they're gonna build this stuff, and they will maybe get it approved by Congress, but really the whoever approves it, I don't know, the board, whatever. But their plan is not to actually, they don't think that this thing's ever actually gonna be built. Like, they're hoping that they can negotiate some contracts, get some contracts to their friends who do construction or themselves, and, you know, spend a bunch of taxpayer money building something until the taxpayers, individuals of Hawaii are like, no, we don't want this, you're not building it. And they put up the resistance, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're not gonna build it. But, you know, they did make a little bit of money trying to build something, and then it's like this start and stop thing. Like, for example, the highway in Kahului took like 20-something years to expand, right? Plus, like, they would do this thing where they'd be like, oh, we're gonna build it this way, and then they'd be like, oh, we did it wrong, or, you know, we had to transfer the job from this contractor to that contractor. All they're really trying to do is take the taxpayer money and give those allotments over to their construction friends. Their construction friends are gonna take as long as possible, possibly even building it wrong on purpose, so that they can delay the process and collect more money and keep jobs, you know, for their friends that are all the county workers. You know, that's how they did it in Kahului. They're like, oh, we built it wrong. Oh, we gotta take what we just built and unbuild it and then build it back up again, like taking way too long. Like, they don't get away with this kind of stuff in other states quite as well as they do. An example of this is the Super Ferry. Like, that was one of the few projects that actually did get all the way made. And they built it, They realized very quickly that a bunch of invasive species were being brought over in the cars. It was crashing into the whales. It was just a terrible idea. And they scrapped it. And then it cost the Hawaii taxpayers a ton of money, and it was a terrible idea, right? But there's always some developer saying that we need to build all this stuff. All this stuff. Like, this 15-minute smart city thing in Lahaina, they probably said, like, yeah, we want to do this, but there was no way that it was actually going to get done. Like, it's the Hawaii way of, like, we're going to build this thing. They maybe get a little bit of work done, send a little bit of taxpayer money to their construction buddies, and then it gets stopped up by the Hawaii people, and it doesn't go through. So that's the motivation for this kind of stuff. It's sad, but, you know, it wasn't a government laser beam sent to destroy all the people and kill all the kids. It's, you know, there's this other video content that was going around about, like, the blue stuff, you know, not getting destroyed, right? Well, if you look at that one TikTok video or whatever, the first video is like, you know, there's guys with blue t-shirts walking around in the photo. It's like obviously a filtered photo. The second part of it is like, there's like a ceramic pot. Yeah, ceramic pots. Ceramic is made for really high heat applications, and it's like blue paint, you know, on a ceramic pot. That stuff's not gonna burn. And the third would be those umbrellas, the blue umbrellas that didn't get burned. Those are flame retardant umbrellas. And the other part about how the houses were burnt, but the trees around the houses were not. Well, if you're preventing a fire, they tell you not to cut down the live trees because live trees have a lot of water in them and they're not going to burn. So one, right, you look at a tree, it goes up like this, and maybe the leaves burn off, right? But at the core, it's like a stick full of water. The flame goes up, can't really ignite much, goes up, it'll just burn all the leaves off and, you know, maybe burn the leaves off, maybe not. But a house, if you ever built a log cabin for building a fire, a house is a thing full of dried wood with probably a propane line, gas line, you know, all kinds of other flammable stuff in there. So you light the match at the bottom of the house, the flame rises, the entire house gets burned down, and the trees near it do not get burnt because they're wet trees and they're wet wood, and there's no fuel at the top. So houses that are made out of wood are very flammable. Trees that are full of water are not flammable. Also, like the aerial shot that shows, you know, all these like rich people's houses that did not get burned. Well, if you have a very large like lawn, well-watered lawn, like these green lawns and stuff that is far away from the fire, the lawn's not going to catch on fire. There's nothing to burn on a grassy lawn that's full of water. So, you know, at first I was very quick to blame the government, saying like, why didn't they shut off the electricity, you know, to prevent this fire? Well, they couldn't shut off the electricity because if they did, then there would be no water to put the fire out. And we need a better system, a better emergency management system for a tropical storm, right? We can't have this system where they're like, oh, well, we can't prevent the electrical fire because if we do, it'll shut the water off. Like, no, we need to have a fail-safe to where the water can still come out even if they do shut off the electricity to prevent another electrical fire. So better policy going forward, and something more intelligent, like a fail-safe that is sufficient. A fail-safe that is sufficient in Kula, a fail-safe that is sufficient in Lahaina. And, you know, spreading all this misinformation about the government shooting everybody with a laser beam takes away from the reality of the situation, which is a better policy going forward and a better emergency management system that does not require electricity to be on during a tropical storm to fight a fire. So thanks for listening. Talked to all different kinds of people, some that were there, some emergency medical people, some people that were in the Paradise Fire, like a very diverse amount of people. And I learned a lot about fire science and, what was going on there throughout this process. So appreciate you guys for listening, and pray for Maui. Aloha.